Hi, I'm Kate Miller, Christian Education Director at Dandridge First United Methodist Church. Welcome to Week 7 of our Fall Online Bible Study for our young adult group in the year 2023. This study is meant specifically for our young adults, those between high school graduation and their mid to late 30s, but we welcome viewers of all ages to watch along. If you missed the former videos in this series, I'll link them below in the description box so you can check them out. Comment below and give this video a thumbs up to let us know that you're watching and studying along. In this week's video, we're going to talk about the arrest of Jesus, which is found in the Gospel of John, chapter 18. Let's go to the scripture together, turning to John, chapter 18, verses 16 through 37. Peter had to stay outside the gate. Then the disciple who knew the high priest spoke to the woman watching at the gate, and she let Peter in. The woman asked Peter, "You're not one of that man's disciples, are you?" "No," he said, "I am not." Because it was cold, the household servants and the guards had made a charcoal fire. They stood around it, warming themselves, and Peter stood with them, warming himself. Inside, the high priest began asking Jesus about his followers and what he had been teaching them. Jesus replied, "Everyone knows what I teach. I have preached regularly in the synagogues and the temple where the people gather. I have not spoken in secret. Why are you asking me this question? Ask those that heard me. They know what I said." Then one of the temple guards standing nearby slapped Jesus across the face. "Is that the way to answer the high priest?" he demanded. Jesus replied, "If I said anything wrong, you must prove it. But if I'm speaking the truth, why are you beating me?" Then Annas bound Jesus and sent him to Caiaphas, the high priest. Meanwhile, as Simon Peter was standing by the fire warming himself, they asked him again, "You're not one of his disciples, are you?" He denied it, saying, "No, I am not." But one of the household slaves of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, "Didn't I see you out there in the olive grove with Jesus?" Again, Peter denied it, and immediately a rooster crowed. Jesus' trial before Caiaphas ended in the early hours of the morning. Then he was taken to the headquarters of the Roman governor. His accusers didn't go inside because it would defile them, and they wouldn't be allowed to celebrate the Passover. So Pilate, the governor, went out to them and asked, "What is your charge against this man?" "We wouldn't have handed him over to you if he weren't a criminal," they retorted. "Then take him away and judge him by your own law," Pilate told them. "Only the Romans are permitted to execute someone," the Jewish leaders replied. This fulfilled Jesus' prediction about the way he would die. Then Pilate went back into his headquarters and called for Jesus to be brought to him. "Are you the king of the Jews?" he asked. Jesus replied, "Is this your own question, or did others tell you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate retorted. "Your own people and their leading priests brought you to me for trial. Why? What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not an earthly kingdom. If it were, my followers would fight to keep me from being handed over to the Jewish leaders. But my kingdom is not of this world." Pilate said, "So you are a king?" Jesus responded, "You say I am a king. Actually, I was born and came into the world to testify to the truth. All who love the truth recognize that what I say is true." The first aspect of this passage that we should tackle is about Peter's denials of Jesus. If you know the story of the crucifixion of Jesus, you know that Jesus tells Peter before it occurs that Peter will deny him, Jesus, 3 times before the rooster crows. This passage shows us all 3 times, and even the crowing of the rooster. Peter's denials come in verse 17, verse 25, and verse 27. And the infamous rooster crows in verse 27 as well. There's an interesting bit of biblical parallel here that is important to mention. In a previous video, I mentioned that the I am statements are some of the most famous parts of the Gospel of John. By using I am statements throughout the Gospel of John, Jesus defines who he is, the Messiah, and clarifies his divinity to those watching and listening. In the 3 occasions that Peter denies Jesus, he uses the opposite phrase, I am not, to make his denial statements. Throughout his ministry in the Gospel of John, Jesus declares exactly who and what he is. But here, Peter uses the opposite phrasing to show his unwillingness to even claim his discipleship or affiliation with Jesus. This juxtaposition shows us how different the Messiah's supernatural and sacrificial nature is in comparison with mere human flaws and tendencies. The second aspect of this passage that we should consider is when Jesus goes before Pontius Pilate. As Jesus is brought before Pilate, the Roman governor, where the Jewish leaders who arrested Jesus were hoping to have him executed, Pilate essentially asks Jesus two questions. First, are you the king of the Jews? And second, what have you done? Kingship mattered a lot during that time, just as a political affiliation might matter to folks now. It showed where loyalty might lie, and it showed who one felt they needed to report to. Pilate also asks about guilt. By asking, what have you done? Pilate is asking how Jesus is guilty and why his own community would consider him guilty. Jesus answers positively, focusing on two things. In verse 36, he claims his kingdom is not of this world and thereby explains that he does not belong to just one earthly community, but to a larger eternal one. In verse 37, he says he has testified to the truth. Jesus does not deny that he is who he has claimed to be throughout his ministry. And he only defends himself by declaring that he's done what he's been sent to do, to share the truth, to teach, and to lead a kingdom that is not of this world. And yet, despite it all, Jesus will die for the supposed crimes that his opposition believes him to have committed. When we gather together virtually for our last video next weekend, we'll talk about the resurrection and the aftermath, and I hope you'll join us. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon back here on YouTube.